Who's that?
Um,
Okay, it looks like it worked. Okay, all
hold on
right.
Hang on.
one sec.
You didn't get a message?
Well, Sarah May, can you go to the YouTube channel?
It wasn't up and running, but I see that it's being live streamed now, so I'll head over there.
Thank you.
We are good to
Are we good?
You tell me.
Yes, we are good to go.
Okay, so the first item is the approval of the minutes from November 9th, 2022 meeting of Policy and Standards Committee. Judge, you want a second?
I'll second it, yes.
Okay. Do we have any discussion about it?
Nope.
Okay, then all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Approved unanimously. Okay, the next item is the motion to recommend adoption of the revised complaints policy process. Who's going to talk about that?
That would be me.
Okay,
So Natasha George speaking about the proposed adoption of the complaints policy process. This process describes how TIDC staff handle complaints received. In the revised policy where we have referred to the complaint specialist, that would be me. So staff, we maintain a more detailed process manual, but since this policy was last updated in August of 21, we wanted to put it before the PNS committee as well as for adoption by the full board to incorporate the passage of Senate Bill 2120, which broadens our mandate to work with family protection representation cases. So we've incorporated the ability to accept and respond to complaints related to family protection representation. We have added detail or additional referral resources for complainants. And then we've improved the flow and accuracy of the policy with some other non-substantive revisions. In the revised policy is shown on the page following this one, and then a clean version of the policy follows that.
Okay.
So if y'all, I'm happy to answer any questions or comments or.
Judge, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I was wondering why the new policy and maybe the old policy separated out attorney complaints and the procedure for attorney complaints from inmate mail. And some of it seems like it's duplicative or pretty close to, not exactly the same language. And I wondered if, and I'm not saying this is the wrong way to do it, I'm just wondering, first of all, do we treat them differently? I mean, do we treat them differently?
Judge, in the way that we screen them, the only way that they're treated any differently is in the sense that since we receive inmate correspondence via letter solely, that just details the fact that those are entered into PPRI, they're typed into PPRI, by staff member. But I agree, when I was reviewing our policy, it seems duplicative to me. That struck me as well. I don't think that it would be a big deal to just combine all how we handle complaints in general, and then perhaps make a note of, as far as process goes, that any inmate correspondence is hand typed into PPRI. You know, a new complaint is created and then that's typed into PPRI so we can track it.
I think that would be better. I don't know if it's worth doing though. Alex, have you thought about that?
If there really is no difference except how it's filed, then that would be fine.
Well,
Okay.
it looks like there are also complaints from inmate mail that. No, I mean, I think that would be better as long as we're changing it.
Right. Now, the only other difference that you would notice is that they have additional referral sources that wouldn't be appropriate for someone that's not incarcerated.
Yes, and I think I'm looking on page 2, I had already thought under attorney complaint, we ought to say refer the complainant to the following resources as appropriate, but you say that on the next page where, yeah, you say it on the next page exactly like that, refer the complainant to the following resources as appropriate. So you could list them all and then they just wouldn't be appropriate in every circumstance.
Right. I am, when we discussed this during our policy team meeting, since I don't want to be on record with a guesstimate, but a substantial number of our complaints concern attorneys. So what we do is we just notify the attorney that we received it, that this was received by TIDC. The shorthand that I use for it is an FYI, unless it's the allegation involves I've been incarcerated for 2 years and have not seen my attorney, period. Then that goes to the presiding judge. I mean, not the regional, but the county.
The local.
Yes, ma'am. And as when we were discussing this, drafting it in this fashion, this is how it was adopted in 21. So we just retained it.
Well,
And then,
okay, go ahead, sorry.
and then since the policy team agreed with the approach of just sending an FYI email if it doesn't merit going to the judge as well, we thought that we would maintain the distinction.
I don't actually see that happening in this because under attorney complaints on both pages, it looks like it says we notify the attorney and the judge presiding. Is that not, that sounds like you said something different just a second ago, but maybe I'm thinking of the wrong kind of complaint. So some of them you just notify the
attorney. But frankly, that does notifying the attorney, I've done that once.
Only the attorney and not the judge?
Correct. So it really is more accurate to say that both the attorney and the judge are notified, because the 9 out of 10 complaints involve I haven't seen my lawyer, spoken to my lawyer for or I've
So-
never met my lawyer.
Okay. So that would be a new policy to adopt, but it's been what we've been doing anyway.
Correct.
Okay.
So, but what I could do to make that, to provide more clarity for the board, and I can understand how it looks like it's repetitive, right?
Right.
It wouldn't take me very long, I don't think, to redraft it, to remove the redundancies.
I think that's probably a good idea. I know that when you just add to policies or revise them, sometimes it's time to kind of shrink them down. And I think
Yes,
this is
ma'am.
probably a good time to do it. But Scott, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I mean, I don't feel like this is something, you know, that we have to get done like here and now. Like if some additional work needs to be done on it to, maybe streamline it a little more and remove some, duplicate kind of language, we can do that. And I mean, like I said, I don't think it's like, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Crystal. I mean, do you feel like we need to do this like immediately for your complaints?
Well, I mean, complaints have been around for a long time, I think, in the family rep space, and we just, until the policies change, we really can't take a complaint officially. So that would be my only concern, is we would just be delaying the ability to do that.
But we could streamline it, Judge, and bring it back to the full board April 5th. I don't think we have to wait for another Policies and Standards Committee meeting and whatever, the next June board meeting or something like that. We're talking about non-substantive changes, right? So
Right.
I think we could revise the form of the policy and bring it back to you. It just wouldn't be in the form of a committee motion, but it would be
Right.
in your direction.
Alex, do you think that's worth doing?
Yeah, I understand your concerns about it. And we should make it simpler if we can.
Okay. And
So
there is one substantive change, but it's a change to the policy, not to what we've been doing for the most part.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I think that sounds good, if that's okay with y'all.
okay, so we're gonna table that, and well, not even that. We're just gonna pass on it, and something else will go to the full board.
Yeah, and I had no problems with any of the changes, except, a few little word changes, but in substance, that looks fine.
Yeah,
Well, Judge, if you had any, feel free to send me any word changes that you had to, because I'll incorporate them into the edit.
No, but it's like if you combine it or kind of do it differently, like on the attorney complaints, you have it exactly the way I would say it on one, but not on the other. So
I understand.
the one I like is the one that says, make sure it says resources as appropriate.
Yes, ma'am. Okay,
Okay, thanks.
I've made a note. Thank you.
okay. So, all right, so we'll move forward. So the next part is motion to recommend approval of model forms and indigent defense plan templates, 1 to 13. I guess we're gonna break them up, but pages 11 to 78, who's covering that?
I'm going to do the layout, Alex.
Okay.
Well,
right.
probably it was a big group exercise, as you can imagine, with so many forms. So I think multiple of us may respond to questions, etc. The way we've done this is just as background. We'll start with background before we dive into the forms. We have a whole bunch of model forms, as well as indigent defense plan templates. And these have been adopted over many, many years, decades, frankly. The templates, in fact, were all adopted in 2009. There have been some revisions since then. And the model forms and procedures have been adopted over a pretty significant time period. We haven't really done a full review of them until now. And we realized with some statutory changes that some of the forms needed some revisions, and we decided, well, we haven't looked at them, we should look at them and do a comprehensive review. And so it turned into a pretty big project, as you can see by the number of pages in your meeting materials. And so what we're bringing to you today are suggested revised forms. In one or two cases, a new form, but mostly the revisions to existing forms. Depending upon your action today, we could have recommendations to the full board to adopt them. You may send us back to do additional work on them. Formatting will be updated to make them look better than they do at the moment. You'll see some of them are intended to be on one page and they're maybe bleeding over. We have some font issues. I may have screwed some of them up at the last minute before the meeting book went out. So I think we shouldn't concern ourselves with the non-substantive aspects. If they're adopted, we will make them look good before they get published on our website. And the last thing, to try and really improve their usability, because these do get adopted in a lot of jurisdictions, especially small counties, we're going to the extent possible, make them fillable PDF forms rather than just a plain PDF that you have to print and write on, because a lot of places will be using electronic means of completing them these days. And so with that, there is a summary document that has a mini table of contents starting on page 12. And it's my idea to just go through this. I'll reference the page numbers where the actual forms are, so you can look at the forms, and then we can consider them one by one. So with that, the first form is the revised magistrate warning form. The revised form is on page 16 through 18 of the meeting materials. This has amendments to streamline the form, ensure that defendants understand their rights, and promote compliance with the statutory deadlines related to accepting and transmitting the applications, including new date and time of transmission fields, which will help us in policy monitoring reviews. It also uses a new consular notification form. We used to have a consular standalone form, a fact sheet, but that's now done electronically. And it updates the address on the State Department's website where you find those consular agencies to send the form to. That has changed since the form was adopted. That's the overview. So I think we should probably just dive into any questions or concerns y'all have on the form.
Well, I'm switching back between looking at y'all and looking at the form. So I'm
Sure,
looking at the form now.
me too.
But were the changes redlined?
They were not. And so this is the thing I probably should have said at the beginning. Many of the forms, you're going to see the proposed form and the old form right behind it. The reason we didn't do redline is we did start with that in mind, but the changes became such that the whole form was consumed in red and it was impossible to actually read it. To some extent, it was the formatting changes to, when we change text, then you have to mess with the formatting to get it right and keep it within the margins, etc. So there isn't a red line version of this one. There's only a handful where the changes in substance and formatting's small enough that we could do a red line.
Okay, so the separate counselor notification form, you've taken that and made it into a box in the middle of this form? Is that what that is? No?
No, sir. If you scroll down,
Oh, I see. It's still got that. Okay.
it's just incorporated into the magistration form.
Okay.
So like it.
It's a standalone form currently,
Okay.
but they really flow together. So,
Right.
which is why we combine them.
Judge,
Yeah.
Get anything else on that one?
Well, I went through it once and I didn't really understand some of the stuff I was looking at, and I didn't see anything I objected to. But now that I see that kind of how this was done, I'm going to vote for it if you are, but I might come up with some comments after I spend more time comparing the forms, because I was looking for red line, and
Yeah, it's kind of like you. I talked to Scott the other day, and he pointed out to me that they were like adjacent, old and new, and that's how I knew. But I didn't realize that right away.
so that's kind of where I stand. I'm going to need to look at them again, but I don't have any objections as they are, but I might, between now and the full board meeting, see something that I want to talk about, and I'll let you know if I do.
Okay, so should we vote?
Can
Yeah, I think
You're
so.
okay.
Can I
Okay.
ask a question before y'all do vote? Because I, admittedly, I was not in the middle of all of these revisions. And so on the magistrate warning form, you've kind of changed the, I guess, perspective of who is signing the form and who is attesting or acknowledging certain things. For example, the new form has it where the arrestee is acknowledging, like, I am charged with this offense. I have the right to an attorney. Whereas the old form was really the magistrate saying that, you are charged with something. You have the right to hire an attorney to represent you. Would you like to request the appointment of counsel? So can you explain why you kind of change the perspective almost of like why did you feel the need to change it from like the magistrate, acknowledging this to basically the arrestee acknowledging it?
Wesley, would you like me to
Sure.
take that one? So the reason that I did it that way is in Potter, we had attorneys at magistration. So I've been the attorney at magistration. And so how the process works up there, and now that I've observed it in many other counties, it works the same way. The arrestee comes in, and this whole process, well, in Potter, they just have them sign this form before they've ever been informed of their rights. In other counties, the informing them of their rights takes about as long as you can say them as fast as you can. So that people walk out of there not knowing what just happened in many cases. So I wanted to encourage the magistrates to promote a better understanding with the arrestees as to this process, right? What are you charged with? What are your rights? What are your so on and so forth? So we can, because here's another big chunk of complaints that we receive refer to this process. Well, I didn't understand that. So it's to decrease misunderstandings between the arrestee and the magistrate, promote understanding and promote a better process for the magistrates to ensure that arrestees aren't just being, processed in and out as quickly as possible. Because when when the magistrate says, well, you have the right to counsel, would you like to request counsel? That if you're saying it very quickly, I mean, I wouldn't pick up on it. You know,
Let me ask you, because I'm switching back and forth, but is the magistrates, the thing the magistrates signs pretty much the same, but you've added the from the perspective of the person who's arrested, or have you taken something away from the magistrates warning?
I haven't taken anything away from the magistrates. I've added in a portion for the arrestee to acknowledge.
Okay,
I heard this. I know this.
Scott, what do you think? Is that, it seems like that's going to be helpful for the person who's reading it as opposed to just listening it, but I don't know.
Well, I'm going back and forth because I don't have it printed out either, and I don't see all those individual warnings. So where are they?
Let
The
me
top
ask,
of the first page, under arrestee acknowledgement, I
Yes.
charged with the offense of blank, have the right to have an attorney represent me. It is framed from the perspective of the arrestee, but it is the full list of rights that the magistrate warns on.
you know what, this is, are these documents that you could do compare documents on so we can see the changes?
Hmm.
That would be real helpful to me. But, and
Hmm.
maybe we shouldn't go ahead and vote them out until we've had a chance to look at that.
I think that's right, Judge. Given that fact, I don't think a committee motion really makes sense, coming from y'all if there's going to be potentially more edits.
But is this, I probably should have printed out the whole 80 pages, but now I'm trying to go back and forth and it's hard.
Well, another thing is even with a committee motion, the other members of the board might want to see redlined or a compare documents version.
Hmm.
Sure. Yeah, I think that is a,
Even
They
if you
will.
just highlighted the places.
yes,
I
sir.
could
That
upload
may
it.
be the ticket. Yeah.
Yeah. But compare documents is easier than any of that. You just, let the machine do it.
Hmm. So the idea might be that we would do that for the next meeting. Yeah.
Yeah, for the board meeting, but to us, I'd like to see it ahead of time, so I have time to go through it, because I'm guessing the other members of the board are gonna rely on Alex and me, even if we don't
Yeah.
actually adopt them now.
Right.
That sounds good. We could get you something like that in advance of the full meeting book. The meeting book is planned to go out early next week to the full
Okay.
board. So if we got this to you in the next day or so.
Oh, yeah.
Revisions
that'd
to
be
you and
great.
Alex. You could provide us feedback that we could incorporate into the final meeting book is what I was thinking. So we aren't trying to do to the extent we can, prevent a lot of wordsmithing in the board meeting.
Right.
Yeah, that'd be good. That'd be good. Okay, that last item I think is pretty simple. I think we could do that one. That
What's the
a
last?
motion to recommend approval of the revised legislative policy.
Oh, Yeah, the last two things, I mean, do y'all want to just skip going through the model forms then, or?
Oh, I'm sorry, you have other model forms we could do
Yeah,
too.
there's 13 of them. I mean, I realize we may not be
But it-
voting on them, but particularly if you have feedback right now for us, obviously that you would want incorporated, we'd want to know that. We don't have to go through them all if you don't know
just-
right now. What your
Did you
feedback-
wanna have highlighted for all of them so you could see them first?
Unless there's something that Wesley thinks is worth pointing out to us now, like,
And why don't you just highlight them all at once and then we'll.
That sounds good. I mean, there's a handful that we do have track changes versions where the changes were minor, both in substance as well as form, and that's where we felt like where track changes made sense to include initially. I mean, you could consider those.
Yeah, I think it's just easier if you just do them all and send them back.
Okay, we can
But
do
it's
that.
just, the last thing about the legislative policy seemed to me that was mostly form.
Yeah, the number, yeah, so skipping model forms then for now. We actually have policy monitoring rules review, which is item number 7. I think that would be ripe for consideration as well. That's on page 79 of the meeting book. That's just before the legislative policy and work group process.
Yeah, I didn't get a motion on that.
There isn't a motion, but we are seeking some feedback, not in the form of a motion.
79.
So basically, I mean, you want me to lay it out for you?
Yeah.
There's a government code provision in chapter 2001 that requires state agencies, including the courts, to review, republish, and readopt with changes or repeal all of its rules every 4 years. And so the last time the policy monitoring rules were reviewed and adopted was in 2020. So they're due for review this year. So what we've done is made some notes on areas that we think we should explore with the rules. We don't have the rules here for you, but we wanted to get your feedback on our proposals at a high level, and then we could draft rule amendments as well as complete, a rule review process for them. So the 3 areas that we were wanted to highlight were capital appointment processes. And so, of course, we just got done completing a limited scope review in Dallas County, requested by the county, or at least one of the commissioners, to review their capital appointment processes. And Joel and I went and did that on the policy side. Deborah did on the fiscal side. And it seemed to us that was an area that was amenable to being reviewed in each case that we do policy monitoring. There's black letter rules around it. And so our suggestion was to, goodness, I wasn't really expecting that, to do, add capital review processes, capital appointment processes to our process. And the things that we identified we could look at, because we did them in Dallas, were that attorney appointments were made from the appropriate capital appointment lists. So from the regional list where it's necessary, and the 2 attorneys are appointed, at least one of whom is qualified under Article 26052. And then the second thing that we wanted to address was a provision that's called, the section number is called failure to respond to report. And this is where we issue a policy report. There's a time frame involved for responding at 60 days. They can request an extension for 60 more days. And if they don't respond at all, we send a certified letter. And then within 10 days of that letter being sent, if they still don't respond, the policy is that staff cuts off additional grant payments to the county. At the moment, it reads broadly that would include all grant payments, formula as well as improvement. Our suggestion might be to limit it to just formula grants. The idea being is we'd hate to see a improvement grant, a new public defender office, or program such as that jeopardized immediately because of a failure to respond to a report. And then the last area that we thought we could add to the rules was some intermediate steps when a county has trouble coming into compliance with processes that they've said they were going to do to meet the meet the policy monitoring findings. So right now, they provide a response, they give us an action plan on how they're going to meet the requirements. And if they don't come into compliance, the next step in the rules, at least, is essentially cutting off funds. Failure, to comply, the remedies are cutting off funds. In reality, we have intermediate steps that we've taken. Currently, Maverick and Zavala County are in that intermediate process where they have to report regular data to us monthly at the moment on requests for counsel, rulings on requests for counsel, et cetera, for us to kind of keep tabs on whether their processes are working. This is after, we've had multiple reviews with findings and they still haven't come into compliance. We thought we could spell some of those steps out in the rules. You would still, address them individually by county at the time, but at the moment, none of those intermediate steps are in the rules. So our suggestion was that we might include those as well. So those are the three areas that we've identified that we would, like to, draft some rule amendments for y'all to consider. As part of this process, we'll look at the whole, all the rules just to make sure they flow right and, match practice, et cetera. But y'all have any reaction to those areas for us to consider drafting?
I'm for all three of those. That sounds like they need to be looked at.
Yeah, so right now is, on the failure to respond to report, I think these are all good too, and I'm glad you thought of them. But what's the policy now about failure to respond to report? Because what we're talking about is making sure that the counties aren't over penalized. Is it mandatory?
Yes, it is.
It's mandatory.
Yeah, it's mandatory. The direction that the rules give staff is if a county doesn't respond to a report, we have to give them send a letter. We call it the 10-day letter. We've had to send very few of these, but by certified mail to make sure they got it right. I mean, this is kind of a last warning, if you will. They've been contacted many times before this letter goes. If they still fail to respond after 10 days of receipt of that letter, we're directed to withhold all future grant payments until they do respond, and this committee or the full board has authorized us to release those funds.
Yeah, we need to change that. Thank you.
So just a formula grants is what we were thinking it should be limited to. I think that was how it was intended, but it was really before we had improvement grants and all of these new public defender programs that were grant funded. So
if there's a report that relates to the improvement grant, would there be such a thing?
There's quarterly progress reports from the counties on their improvement grants as well. And I believe if they don't submit those reports, the expenditure report every quarter under that improvement grant and the progress reports, then they also don't get a payment that quarter until they do.
Okay, thanks.
I guess that's my only concern. I want to make sure that we still have that authority under the improvement grants to cut off payments when, particularly in regards to reporting to us, because we have run into that problem where a grantee hasn't reported, submitted their quarterly reports. So this would not impact that ability, right?
No,
Okay.
that's in the grant rules, the process you're talking about, and this
Okay.
doesn't change that. This is only to do with a policy monitoring report that they don't reply to, which once again, very rare, but if they don't reply, then we're directed right now to cut off all funds after this letter goes. So this would limit it to formula grants was the proposal.
We withhold them temporarily or
Exactly. Yes.
Okay.
It's temporarily until the board until they submit a response and the board directs us to release the funds effectively. So your next meeting after they submit the report.
Okay.
Okay, well, we'll work on these rules and bring them back to you. Depending upon how substantial they are, there's kind of a couple of options. We could do it at another PNS meeting, perhaps before the June board meeting, where we could vet them. It's possible we may still have model forms that we're considering at that point. We may not get all 13 of them in perfect form to be adopted at the April 5th board meeting. So that would be a possibility. But I think it might depend on how substantial the changes are and what else is on the June board meeting agenda. That's usually a very heavy meeting with improvement grant applications. So that's why a PNS meeting might make sense before that.
Okay.
The only other item on our list is the legislative policy and legislative work group process. And that's on page 80 of your meeting materials. So the first thing that I'm going to address is the legislative policy. This has, of course, been adopted by the board and revised at different times over the years. We have a revised policy beginning on the next page. And the two things that we're recommending to this policy are to add family protection services to the subject matter area for which the TIDC board may make recommendations. And this is because of amendments made to the section that directs the board to make recommendations for the improvement of our systems in Senate Bill 2120 from last session. That's the big bill that added family protection representation to the mandate of the TIDC board. So this would just incorporate family protection services into that list of juvenile and criminal indigent defense matters that you have authority to make recommendations in. And the second one is really non-substantive changes throughout, and that is there's references to the TIDC director, and it's really a TIDC now has an executive director, and that's a holdover provision from the days when the organization was known as the Task Force on Indigent Defense. It was headed by a director, not an executive director. So we're just really bringing it into line with the actual statute. So those are the only two changes, and we do have a motion to recommend to the full board adoption of the revised legislative policy.
Okay. You second that, Judge?
Yes, I do.
All right. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so,
And the last thing related to this is the legislative work group process itself, and Bill Cox is going to lay that out.
Thank you, Wesley. Good morning. The legislative work group process, we anticipate following with PNS and the board's approval, the same approach we've used in the past, other than adding a separate work group to focus on family protection representation. We're looking at having two different meetings, one initially, which would tentatively be May 30th and 31st, one day for each of the work groups. And then about 6 weeks later, having a final meeting to finalize proposals before coming back to policy and standards, and then ultimately the board on August 6th and 7th with the work group's recommendations. And staff is in the process of developing an invite list, which we would then circulate to the policy and standards committee before sending out invitations to be sure that we've incorporated all the stakeholders who have both participated in the past and anyone else who would need to be added, which is especially important this year with expanding to include the child protection representation. We also anticipate there would be two sub-work groups on the criminal and juvenile side dealing with the MAC directors and MAC programs, as well as capital representation. I think Scott wanted to address those some.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. So for managed assigned counsel, we have a regular monthly meeting with all of the MAC directors, and there was a substantive bill proposal last session that the board approved regarding some changes to the managed assigned counsel statute. Between the board's approval and, bills getting submitted, there were, some concerns expressed by some of the MAC directors on what was in that original bill language. And so we just want to basically clarify, I want to make sure that all the MAC directors are on the same page, have, agreed to everything, in that proposal before we, bring that to the board. And so I think a little more work is probably needed on the front end before the legislative work group. So we were going to get together with MAC directors to kind of hammer out what they want in that bill related to MACs. On the issue of capital representation, after the Dallas report, I gave a presentation to the presiding judges on the issue of capital representation. I heard, some, expressed interest from the PJs about the statute itself, and maybe there were some needed changes to the statute. And so we thought it might be a good idea before the legislative work groups began to try to get together some capital experts, maybe a couple of PJs to see you know, bounce around some ideas on how the statute could be revised before, you know, coming into the legislative work group. So that was, you know, another thing that we were talking about doing.
And so were there any questions or direction from the committee on how you'd like us to proceed?
I have one question. Let me see if I can find this. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, oh, I know where it is. It's on page 80. Down at the bottom, under TIDC's legislative policy, the proposals that have significant support at the workshop will be presented to policies and standards. Is that the standard now, just significant support, or is there some more specific amount of support, like a majority or something like that?
Judge, as I understand the process, I have not participated on the TIDC side. However, I've been a work group participant a number of times over the years. The work group focuses on a consensus, and those with consensus come forward to policy and standards to see what the will of the committee and then ultimately the board is. And
You should
Leslie,
say that instead of significant support. I think significant support is probably vaguer than we want. But if it's been consensus in the past, maybe we should say that, or general consensus, or something, not general consensus, something less. What do you see why I'm saying significant support doesn't sound specific enough?
yes, Judge.
Okay. But I don't know what I would substitute for it. If has it been majority? I mean,
It's
They probably all
usually, it's more than a majority. Yeah, we, you know, if there's some vote and it's 13 to 12, we don't bring it forward. I was looking in the policy to see if there was, where that language came from. And I don't know that it's there. We have voting, you know, clear voting direction, obviously at the committee level and the full board. You know. So I don't think it's actually in the policy specifically.
it's just been how y'all been.
That's
doing
how
it.
we've handled it. You know, if there's one person that's opposed, you know, and everybody else is for it, we still want to bring it forward. And the direction y'all have given us is to provide you the arguments both for and against that were made to a particular recommendation. So that person will still have a voice. If there is one person who doesn't like an idea, we're going to put, you know, what the nature of the opposition was and the rationale, so you'll have that information when you consider it. But
Well, now I'm getting confused. So you're saying that even if there's just one person that has a point of view different from everybody else, it will go to policies and standards, or it won't?
it will. So I mean, say there's 15 people that are for it and one person against it at the work group. Yeah, we would bring that proposal forward to you.
Well, that's not what this says. This says the proposals have significant support. The work group will be presented to policies and standards.
Well, I'm saying 15 out of 16 people in my hypothetical would be supporting it. Would that be significant support?
Well, I think Judge Keller's point may be much less. I mean, from significant support could be like even more opposition. You know, there's like 4 people who are opposed, but 15 supporting. Am I wrong, Judge Keller? Is that what you're getting at?
I was confused. So the only proposals that don't go to the work group is where I guess I don't really understand how it works. Yeah, the ones that have significant support go to the Policies and Standards Committee, but significant support is not. I don't know. I think it's just asking for trouble down the line if we don't make it more specific, but maybe I'm wrong.
what I remember is it's always been a clear majority.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's not spelled out in the policy, though. That's just the language I put in here, in your meeting materials. So we're not held to that. And yeah, maybe that wasn't the best phrasing.
well, I think if that's what you're doing and it works, maybe it is the best phrasing. But, so what if it was, I don't know, say 5 in favor of a new proposal and 6 against it? Does that count as significant support?
No.
No,
I mean, Alex said clear majority. I don't know if that's the right word, but that's, yeah, it's approaching consensus before we would consider even bringing it to
Okay.
committee.
You know what, I can't think of a different way to say it, so it's probably fine. Unless you want to say clear majority.
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm
gotta
say-
get that. I've gotta get that. Hold on a second. Hello? Yes, hi.
clear majority.
Hi.
Simple majority?
No.
No, that's,
No.
A simple,
that
a
doesn't
simple
work.
majority we would not bring something with a simple
Yeah.
majority.
That's like 12 to 11 vote. We wouldn't bring it. Yeah. Mhm.
No, I mean, if it was like probably 12 to 5, we wouldn't bring it, you
Probably
know?
bring it. Yeah, exactly. Mhm.
I'm just trying,
Super majority. It's still not defined, but that would, yeah.
Louisiana's old 10-2 rule. You can get a conviction with 10. Is that what, that's
Well,
how
you
it
can't use
sounds?
numbers because this group is not.
Right.
No, no, Alex, I'm
Yeah.
making a bad joke, but
Mhm.
okay, a super majority.
At least, yeah. I mean, if there's
mean, what-
significant dissent, these things usually don't get out of committee.
Right.
Gotcha.
Especially if it's like strong dissent, like Association of Counties goes, this is dead. You know,
Right,
then
right.
then we usually don't get much further than that.
Yeah.
Because they're gonna,
Well, what we
You-
have done is like, if there is a situation where there's like 1 or 2 people who are opposed, I
mhm.
think Wesley, you pointed this out, we will still bring that and we will express who is, who has expressed, opposition and what the reasons were. And, laid it all out there. The rules do allow for any board member to bring any legislative proposal
Yes.
forward to the full board for a vote. Even if it doesn't pass through it doesn't, get the full support of the legislative work group.
I understand.
Or is brought later even. Yeah, it doesn't, if it's board members' proposals, it doesn't even have to go through the work group if they don't wish.
So would we be better with something like general consensus?
I mean, I'm fine with that. And the thing is, that these terms are not in the policy, I don't believe. So it doesn't really matter. It's just whatever comes to the committee. That's when the strict, voting regime kicks in. But I like that as well, though.
Well, I think consensus is fine. It implies less than unanimous.
Yeah,
which
general consensus.
We don't need unanimous, so.
I'll put consensus in this document. It's once again not in the policy, so it's not critical.
Right.
That's yeah. I think we all have an understanding of what will come to the committee from the work group.
Okay.
All right.
Sorry I had to leave it. That was a return call from the director of TIDC.
What? TIDC. That's Scott. He's right here.
Not TIDC, EDCJ.
There we go.
Okay. All right.
It's like I didn't see Scott on the phone. That's good.
No,
Too many acronyms.
Yeah.
So I think he's just gonna use as a working definition consensus and then
okay,
may improve on that later.
okay.
But is this something, we're voting on the policy though, right? Not the process.
That's right. Yeah, if
We
you have
already- yeah, we
feedback on
did
the
that.
work group process, yeah, you've already
Okay.
voted the policy, so, yeah. Did you? I think so.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah,
So that's all the motions. Do you have anything else, Wes?
that's it.
Okay,
So between now and like the next day or so, we will get you a document with the model forms.
and I think we can do a lot of that by email. If you just send it to us, and then if we have suggestions, we'll share them.
That sounds great, yeah. And we'll incorporate those suggestions into the document as it goes into the full board meeting book early next week, so if you could get those changes to us, obviously as soon as you can, this week would be great.
Yep, I'll make time. Is there any other business? Okay.